Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Annie Black. I am the Director of Programs and Volunteers at the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. Thank you all so much for being here today for today's installment of our 2021 Summer Survivor Speaker Series. Today you will hear from Julie Meetal Berman, a second-generation survivor and daughter of Holocaust survivors Magda and Les Mittelman of blessed memory. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our community partners for the Summer Survivor Speaker Series: Cristo Rey Dallas, Jewish Family Service of Greater Dallas, Legacy Senior Communities, Mosaic Family Services, Refugee Services of Texas, and the Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commission. We are grateful for your support as always, as it makes series like these possible. So today, Julie is going to share her parents' stories with you, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of the program. So at any time during the program, if you think of a question, you can go ahead and click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and type in and submit your question, and we'll answer as many of those as we can at the end of the program. So I'd now like to turn it over to Julie Berman. Julie?
Hang on one second. Okay. Having a little trouble.
No, you're fine. Do you see that start video right by the, should have been right by the unmute button.
Sorry. Yeah, except it's not letting me.
Let me try that. I just asked you to start your video, Julie. Let's see if that, did that pop up a little? Perfect, there you are.
There we are. Sorry about that, everybody. And let's go. Okay, I hope everybody can see that. So like Annie said, my name is Julie Meetal Berman, and I am a second-generation Holocaust survivor. So what that means is that since both of my parents were Holocaust survivors, that makes me the second-generation survivor. Although this story is all about my parents and not about me at all. So here are my parents. I'd like to introduce you to Magda and Les Mittelman. And this picture in the middle was on their wedding day in 1945. Cute little couple, don't you think? I think they're cute. So both my parents came from Hungary. Hungary is a country in Eastern Europe. It's not a huge country in comparison to Germany and Poland, but it's a good sized country. It's completely surrounded. There's no ocean or any kind of waterway if you had to get away quickly. It's completely surrounded. My mom came from a small town called Szolnok, and my father came from the second largest city in Hungary called Debrecen. Life before the Holocaust was pretty much like all of your lives. My mother's side of the family was fairly poor. My grandparents on the left, her name were Julie and Samuel. I'm named after my grandmother. They both had to work. My grandmother was a seamstress, so she made clothes for other people. And my grandfather was a salesman, and he traveled quite a bit. They had 3 daughters. And the picture in the middle is of my mom and her oldest sister when my mom was about 3 years old. And the picture on the right is of the family at a wedding in 1939, probably one of the last pictures that was taken as a family before the war broke out. My grandparents were not very religious, so my mom went to regular public school. And this is her class picture from when she was about 15 years old. And they would go to synagogue on high holidays, but otherwise not religious, really. My father's side of the family was a little bit better off. They were more middle class. My grandfather had his own business and he made furniture for people. And many times after school, my father would go and help him out and learn the trade. My grandmother was a stay-at-home mom. She had 3 boys and a girl to take care of. They were also a little bit more religious than my mom's side of the family. My father went to religious school, and that's his class picture. He's inside that red circle. He was a scrawny little kid. He loved to play soccer, and many times he would skip choir practice at the synagogue because he was out playing soccer with his buddies. So 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and Hungary, although did not join the war yet, they were siding on with the Germans, with the Nazis. So they were very sympathetic to them. And so the first order that the Hungarian government gave was that all men over the age of 18 had to enlist into the military. And soon after that, all men who were Jewish had to start wearing a yellow armband. So my father was just 18, and so he was taken into the military. And then, of course, right away, he was put in a separate group that had to wear the yellow armband. And they were taken all over Hungary to do labor in preparation for the time when the Nazis would come and invade Hungary. So they were getting the country ready with camps, with prisons, with whatever they needed to get ready. So on the first place where my father was taken to was this small little town called Szolnok. And that's where our love story begins. So I'm going to introduce you here to my father, and he's going to tell you what happened in Szolnok.
Well, they sometime, where we were housing, there was a elementary school, and she had a friend maybe 2 blocks further, and they knew in the city a lot of Jewish boys there. So the Jewish girls, they came to visiting there. They saying, you need something, we can bring you, etc. There I met with her. And I was there about 10 months in Szolnok. And that's the place which is the most comfortable one, because I get a very good friend, one of the Hungarian sergeant, who knows I met with the girl and I want to go to visiting her. And sometime he take me out from the camp to let me go there, and he picked me up later to take back to the camp.
So meanwhile, while Hungary was not yet fully in the war, anti-Semitism was getting very bad. We see it today. Anti-Semitism is creeping its ugly head again. But in Hungary, even though they weren't in the war, the anti-Jewish laws went into effect. So in this next video, you're going to hear my mom, who's going to talk about how she had to start wearing the yellow star.
We gathered the yellow stars. We had to wear the yellow stars, and we can go out on the street. My mother, everybody had it to make by herself. My mother did it, and I was putting on my coat, on my dress also, because I had a job, and I went to work with my, with the yellow star.
So after 10 months in Szolnok, my father and his unit were shipped out to the Russian front. So the Russian front was the border between Poland and what was already then the Soviet Union. And this was the first time that my father actually came into contact with the Germans. So now I'm going to let him tell you what happened there.
And there we get a German. And those Germans, they were taking us next to their barrack, and they used us for putting down mines. They signed up an area where we had to put mines there. They show us how to put, or cleaning mines. The first day experience what we had, the 2 boys blew up on that minefield, what they put them up. They didn't do that right, they were careless and step on the mine what the another one put it down because they didn't mark them.
So here, I'm very lucky to have a couple of pictures of my father with his unit, his labor unit on the Russian front. And you can see they're still wearing Hungarian army uniforms. And you can also see the yellow armband. So this was really slave labor. At this point, sorry, at this point, they had no communication with their families. Their families didn't know if they were dead or alive. They were taken from place to place all along the border. So as they were going all along, one of the Germans' wagons, one of these carts that they carried around with all of their supplies, broke down. And the German in charge found out that my father knew how to build things because he used to work with his father in his furniture making business. So he told my father that he was going to send him over to the next little town to repair it. So he sent my father over. And when my father walked into this blacksmith's place to fix it, the old man who owned it looked at my father and just started crying. And my father said, why are you crying? What's the matter? And the man said, you remind me so much of my son. And I haven't seen my son in 3 years. He said, the Russians came in here and they took him away. And I don't know if he's dead or alive. He said, you come in here and sit down. I'll make you something to eat and something to drink, and I'll do the repair work for you. It was really nice. My father said, thank you. And he sat down, had a wonderful meal, you can imagine. And when the old man was all done with the repair, he said, come here, I want to show you something. And he took him to the front door and he said, do you see out there in the middle of the street, that hill, right there in the middle of the town? He said, that hill consists of 9,000 Jews. He said 9,000 Jews from this town and the surrounding areas were rounded up. They were brought there. They were made to dig a ditch and they were shot dead there. He said that hill did not stop moving for days. He said that hill will always be here as a reminder to the locals who showed the Germans where the Jewish people lived. So by now it was already 1944, and now Hungary actually joined the Nazi party. They actually joined the war and became part of the Nazi Axis. So the first order that came again was that all the Jews had to go to the ghetto. So the ghetto could have been a building, it could have been a neighborhood, it could have been a city block, depending on how many Jews lived in that town, depended on what the ghetto would be. And so since Szolnok was such a small little town, the ghetto was the school building. And here you can see how people on the right are moving into the ghetto with a few belongings on a cart. You can see the Hungarian policeman. He's kind of pleased with what's going on. He's got a smile on his face. And on the left, you can see how they're boarding it up. So once you're in the ghetto, you can't leave. You're given a ration of food. You're put into a room with a bunch of other people. There's hardly any room for everybody. And you're given a ration of food that you have to share. So now my mom is going to talk to you about the ghetto and how also, before she talks about the ghetto, she'll be talking about a chance meeting she had with a German who actually tried to warn her and help her and why she didn't leave.
First, that he was in Romania and he saw how the Germans, they people, they picking up children and people on the street, from the street, throwing up on a truck, and they just taking it. And he told they will happen here too. don't stay here. Go away from here. Where to go? Nowhere to go. And he told me that he's giving me address in Berlin. And he told, go to Berlin. And I give you an address where to go. And I told him, I'm not going. I am not leaving my parents. I am going where my parents will go. And then one nice day there came two policemen. And I told, you have to pick up all your things, not too many things, because you are going to the ghetto. So we picked up some bedside, bed things, a pillow and a comforter, and couple of things, dish, and on a little buggy, and we just pull it in the ghetto.
So they were in the ghetto for a few weeks, and then another order came and said, you're all going to be deported. So here in these pictures, you can see on the left, people are walking in the middle of the town, heading towards the train station. You can almost see a German in the front. He's hard to see, but they're being led through the middle of the town away. But look on the side, next to the buildings. What do you see? You see people standing there just watching. They're watching as this entire group of people is being taken away. They're bystanders. These people are their neighbors, their co-workers, their schoolmates, their neighbors. They're people that they've known all of their lives, and they're just standing there, just watching as all these people are being taken away. Hey, I'm not Jewish. I don't care. Oh, they're taking them away. And here on the right, you can see them at the train station, and they look confused. They don't even know whether they should be scared or not, because they're not being told where they're going. So in the next video, my mom is going to talk about the deportation, and she's going to call the trains wagons. Some people call them boxcars, some people call them cattle cars. She calls them wagons.
And nobody was telling us anything. And we was going with the second transport. The first transport went in Vienna. We didn't know that. The second transport went to Auschwitz. We didn't know where we going. And we was in the train on this day and on the way to Auschwitz.
Were there other people on the train?
Oh, and the train was full. And the train was full with people. We hardly can sit down.
How old were you?
So, I was 20. Well, they was rushing up us to the wagons. They was even pushing us up on the wagon.
Who was pushing you?
The Germans. And we was about in this wagon. I mean, there was about 5, which one going, or maybe more. We was about 100 people in this wagon, and there was also an old man on the other side in a wheelchair. They was putting on with the wheelchair, and we start to go. We didn't know where we going, but we just moved out, and we was about 3 days on the road, was going, when we saw a chimney, 2 big chimney in the distance, and they was burning. The flame was high up on the sky. And my mother told us that, well, I don't know where we're going, but you get ready that maybe we're going right in the flame. And I don't know why, but I just didn't feel anything. I saw the flame. I didn't feel anything. And then we was we went closer to the place, then we smelled the flesh, the burning flesh. And finally, the train pulled in and stopped.
So in less than 2 months, Hungary deported 440,000 Jews to Auschwitz. Of those 440,000, 320,000 were killed as soon as they got there. They were sent to the gas chambers immediately. And also, when my mom talks about being on the road for 3 days. So for 3 days, the train was moving. There was no stops for food, no stops to relieve themselves, no stop at all. So many people actually perished in those cars in those 3 days. So here in this picture, you can see the arrival, and you can see on the right side, people are separated. On the left side, people are rushing around as they come off the train. You can see the smoke in the sky and the entrance into Auschwitz. Everybody's looking for family members or people that they know. And on the left, where they're separated, men on the one side, left, and the women on the other side. Notice how many more women there are than men. Remember, I told you earlier that all the men over the age of 18 have been enlisted into the labor battalions. So the only ones that were still left were the ones who were either too young or too old or too feeble to do any kind of work. So now my mom is going to talk about the arrival in Auschwitz.
They was all our relatives, and I was waiting until they coming down. And then I looked in and I saw the door open in the other side. And there was the flame. And the soldier who was open the door, they pushed down the wheelchair with the old man. And then I was running after my mother, and we, two of us, it was dark, it was evening, it was raining. And my mother picked some towels and we put on the head, and we started to going. When I looked back, on the man's just still was standing there in the coat like my father outside. But when we went, it was light because all the reflectors was on. And I saw when we passed it, there was a hill of baby shoes. And right beside this, there was an older hill with eyeglasses. And I told to my mother, where we are going? And from distance, there was a fence, and the woman was standing there and hollering that, give the babies to the mother, give the babies to your grandmother or your mother. But they was keep, hollering to us. And we passed this part and we went to a bathhouse. And then we went through all this cleaning of the hair on the body, on the whole body. Well, they was coming also behind us to the same place. But when we started to go, I was looking back. He was still standing there on the first lane in the men's section, and I saw my father. He was looking so sad and so poor with this long winter coat on him, and I just wanted so much to go back to tell him a goodbye. But they was rushing us, and we went in this bathhouse when they cleaned off us, and then after the cutting of the hair, we went to the shower. And when we came out from the shower, they gave us some rags to wear it, which one of them was this short, the other was this long. So we was trying to changing. So when we came out in a big room, there was the men's already, but very few men's came back from the shower. There wasn't more than a dozen.
So there wasn't more than a dozen men who came out of the showers. So you understand that the showers were, you never knew what was going to happen when you went to the showers. You went into the showers and it was water coming down like you would have in a shower, or you went in and instead of water, it was gas and everyone in the room would have been killed. So there wasn't more than a dozen men who came back again because they were either too old or too young to be of any use to the Germans. So now she was in Auschwitz, and here you can see the quarters, the barracks, and you can see that they have wooden bunks where sometimes 3, sometimes 4 people are in the bunk. Sometimes people had to lay on the concrete floor. There was nothing in there to make their life more comfortable. There's no mattresses, there's no pillows, there's no blankets or comforters. All they had were the rags that they came with, whatever they were wearing, coming, or whatever they were given, some rags to wear. And here on the right, you can see a group of women. They look fairly young. You can see how their heads have been shaven, and they're wearing some kind of a uniform. So they must have just come through a selection where they were selected to go out and do some slave labor. So my mom is going to talk to you now about the selections, and she's going to mention Dr. Mengele. I don't know how many of you have heard of Dr. Mengele, but he was known as the angel of death because he would pick out people that he would want to experiment on. So he was particularly interested in children, in twins, and whatever crazy experiments he can think of. So now my mom.
The selection, we went out on there was a big plot, big place before, right in the entrance, and they was taking at us, and naked. And then I saw first time Mengele, Dr. Mengele, and he was selecting. He selected out my cousin first. And she went on, then a couple of weeks later, they tried to do it to hurt us. On the holidays, there was always selection. On every selection, Mengele showed up. The second selection was about in Rosh Hashanah. And then they selected me. And we were sitting there on the plots, upper plots they called, and waiting for, to go. They take it to the or in the shower or right to the station, but usually they give it some normal dress before, they send it to a transport. So, but we were sitting there on the front of the, entrance and was waiting there, and I was thinking about my mother, that I leave my mother and my sister and my youngest sister. I always felt she was always very, very thin, and my mother always worried about her, and I was worried too, and I didn't want to leave them. And then I just jumped up and I started to running. And there was a German soldier who was a priest in civil, and a bunch of women around him and listening, his predication. And then I just crawled in the middle. And then saw the post who was after me. He lost me. So I went back to my mother and sister, and we was there until Yom Kippur, and there was an order selection, and they selected my sister. And then I was martyred because I tried to hiding. and they selected my sister, and my sister went. My sister was gone. Later, they was making a selection again, and every selection I was hiding. And I never was in my mind that they will select old people or not young people, because until this time they always was selecting the young people who they take at work, here and there and everywhere. And this time I was hiding, and my mother was on the selection. When I came back, I find out that my mother is not there. I was running out on the street and I saw my mother is marching, marching there with a bunch of women. They all has a white hair. And I started to running after her and hollering her, but I don't know, he didn't hear me. And I was keep running on the Blockeltester, who was responsible for everybody. She was running after me, and she was trying to find down me. And she told, you have to come back, and don't worry about the people. Don't worry about my mother, where she went. Then she was telling me that she by herself was taking her mother to the gas chamber. And it wasn't felt me better, I tell you the truth.
So now my mom was all alone, and soon after, the Germans realized that the Russians were starting to come across the Polish border, the Russian front. And so because they were afraid that Auschwitz might get liberated, they decided to move 2 train loads of people from Auschwitz to Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen was deep in Germany. And so these 2 train loads took people over to that camp. And if you've ever read the story of Anne Frank, then you know she was on one of these 2 trains as well. So when my mom got to Bergen-Belsen, she found that the conditions there were even worse than they were in Auschwitz, if you can imagine. But she found her sister and her cousin, both of them alive there. But soon after she was reunited with them, the Germans decided to move people again. This time, not on the train, because by now, the British were starting to come over from the west. The Russians are coming from the east, and the Americans are coming from the south. And Germany was being bombarded all the time. So they decided, instead of a train, because the train was a target, they took them on walks. These walks were called death marches, because they marched mostly through the night, through the mountains of Germany, trying to get deeper and deeper into Germany to another concentration camp where they would be killed. So we're going to leave my mom now on the death march with her sister and her cousin. And now we're going to switch over to my father again. Do you remember where we left him off? He was somewhere along the Russian front, all along there putting down landmines. And now, as I said, the Russians are coming. They're starting to come across that border. So the Germans started moving them further into Poland. And as they're going into Poland, in quite a bit of a hurry, one of their wagons breaks down again. And the German in charge tells my father to pick a couple of guys and stay there at the side of the road and repair the wagon and then follow them. He wanted to get the heck out of there because now the Russians are really coming. So he left my father and his 2 buddies there at the side of the road, instructing them to follow when they're done with the repair. And as soon as they were out of sight, my father looked at his friends and he said, I'm not an idiot. I'm not following. We're out of here. And the 3 of them took off into a nearby forest. And when they got into the forest, they found a group of people who said they were partisans. So they were part of the Polish Home Army, which was a large resistance organization that fought all throughout Poland. And they told my father, if you want to join us, you can join us. We have Germans, we have Polish, we have Hungarians, we have Jews, Catholics, anybody and everybody, men and women, can join the resistance. And what we do is we go out and we sabotage. We will do everything possible to keep the Germans back and allow time for the British, the Americans, and the Russians to get here and liberate Poland. So my father and his buddies joined. And as they were going into Warsaw, Warsaw was where the Russians were headed for, my father and his buddies were there. So now I'm going to let my father tell you what happened to him there.
The Warsaw was under German occupation. Germans, they were there. The ghetto was burned already. And they knew it. We have to go in because the Russians getting close to the river, and another side, Wisla. That was the name of the river which is cut at Warsaw half. One side, that was name was the river Wisla. One side was Warsaw city, on the other side some suburb or that one. So they expected there the Russian. We was planning to stay there on opposite side, the German side, you know, to anything what we can destroy there. We were 18 people there. And we were hiding daytime in the houses, and evening we went out. The second evening, I was together with one of my friends, and the big guy, and with another, with Smith, and we was playing with the machine gun. We was set up with the machine gun. And the German patrol who came around there, and that's what we were holding them up. And we had to move back because they were coming up, the Germans, with the tanks. So we moved back about 5 miles from there, about 5 miles, about an hour and a half walk back in the forest, so not to find us. And there they had some small place, building, some kind of storage, something. We put them there to sit there during the daytime. The Germans, they know they have groups there around that city, which is guerrilla groups, and they want to get rid of it. And the German airplane, Germans took us, they came at daytime looking us. And they find that building because he turned back, and when we saw his turn back, we jumped out from the building, and some ditches closed there. We lay down there. They started to hit bombing that building, and they shooting machine gun. So that building, what we had, I just started, we went there when we got there to sleeping there. I took off everything, just the pants in the shirt I had there. And there I had the watch in my pocket that I got from my girlfriend when I met with her in Szolnok before we left. He gave me a silver watch, a flat one, what they were wearing in the small pocket. I left there, so the watch is burned there with my everything else. And we were lucky because we got away without any scratch with the German gun, and we tried to go back to the unit. So we got back to the basic unit, and the third day we went back to the Warsaw again, because every night a different group went there. So the third night was our to go there. So I went there, we were sitting on the top of the storage place, on a higher place, we were sitting there. And the Germans, they were patrolling, and they show us up there on the hill, on the top of the building, and they started shooting us. And we was replying there, and I was in the machine gun, and Sam, he was with me with the belt, which is the heavy, they call them, and the bullet to get into the gun. And a minute I'm telling Sam, I don't get supply. I stuck. What are you doing? I looking at Sam. Sam had no head. They cut. They were shooting them with the machine guns, and I don't know. They was some kind of grenades, and probably that one of them cut his head. Just he had no hair right next to me. Oh my God, I said, I had full bloody. And behind the building was my friend who was preparing to fill the belt with the bullet. I said to him, Reisner, let's go from here, because the gun is gone. We have no way where to stay here. And we tried to go, getting darker that day. We tried to go next to the building. We were laying down behind them. And we know we had a plan to 10 o'clock evening to get one spot where we're supposed to get together to moving back further. And evening, I said, no, right, we have to move. So we started to going slowly, and they were shoot up those candles, like with the air, they're shooting up candles, which is coming back down with the parachute, and they light up the whole area. So when they shoot up, they picked up us with the light, and they started the shooting. The first cut, what they getting, I get hit. They hit me, my leg, a couple of places. My legs get hit from here down, and I couldn't stand up on it. And I am telling to my friend, Reisner, I can't stand on my legs. Would you help me to go try to get to the house? He said to me, you crazy. How can I help you? Everyone is gonna die here. I can't help you. I can't help myself. And he left me there. So I was staying there. The biggest wound was my knee. And I had to tear my shirt and try to clean in the top, but I couldn't move. So I would stay there about get completely dark, and I tried to crawling from there. And again, the candles went up in the air, and they saw me there, and I got a second time. And they shoot me that time on my arm, my head, and on my back. So I was there. I couldn't move. I was bleeding there, and I left there unconscious. And I waked up next, a couple of hours later probably. They were carrying me. They're carrying me on the stretcher to Polak. They're taking me somewhere. And that time I have to mention to you, I was wearing a Hungarian army uniform. What we was taking during the time when we were in the guerrillas. They were robbing one of the storage place what they had, the armies there. So they didn't know who I am. They know I had wearing a uniform, which is not Polish, not Russian. They know Germans, that's a Hungarian uniform. So they carried me the first aid place. They took me a first aid place, and the two boys who there carried the stretcher, they know me, because they were part of there, but they get caught with the Germans, they caught them. And one of them is telling me in my ear, don't worry, Magyar. That's the way the Polak call the Hungarian. Don't worry, Magyar, M-A-G-A, because we're not going to tell them who you are.
So my father was shot, 13 bullets across his body with a machine gun. He was taken to a field hospital where a doctor did surgery on him. And the doctor, while doing surgery, realized that my father is Jewish. So the doctor kept my father quarantined from the other German soldiers in this field hospital. and saved his life a second time, not only by doing surgery, but also keeping him away from the other German soldiers. And the doctor would come 2 or 3 times a day to change his bandages and to bring him food. But soon, about 2 weeks later, my father is still in recovery. The doctor came in and said, tonight after dark, I want you to crawl out the window and leave here because we're being sent back to Germany. The Russians are going to take over the city and we're being shipped back to Germany. So that night, my father crawled out the window on crutches and started to make his way back to Hungary. The Allies, the United States, Britain, and the Russians were bombing Germany and Poland continuously. But remember where my mom was? She was still somewhere on that death march. So now she's going to tell you how she was liberated.
Well, we was working in the factory until March. In March, they was coming the British, and we had to, move from there. I mean, they wanted to take back to Bergen-Belsen, so we went on the road to walk until Bergen-Belsen, but Bergen-Belsen fell to the English, to the British, and they can't take there. So we was walking to Bavaria.
Walking?
For the walking to the mountains. We was walking usually in the night, but sometimes we was walking on the day too. It was snowy and slippery and through to the mountain where it was terrible. My sister was all the time with me. I was watching her carefully. I was taking care of her how I can. And we arrived in Dresden station. When we arrived there was an air raid. On the Germans, they just closed the doors, and they ran to the bunkers in Germany, and in the middle of Germany. And we was praying in this weekend because this, we was up and down, jumping up and down on the first train, and then we went on the road, and we was going to a really wooded area, not wood, trees area. Both sides of the road is trees, and we was going on. A friend of ours had an infection in the leg, and we was helping her on the 2 sides and carrying her little bag. And when we passed a little wood house on the side, then I went inside and I just pushed them out behind the little building. And we were standing there all the way until this whole big transport is passed by. We went in this village. We just picked up a house and we went in and we asked some food. And there, this lady invited in and gave us some sandwich. And when we left, she gave us a bag cooked potato. And she came out to the door with us and she told, this way coming the Russians, and this way they coming the Americans. And then I told to my sister, okay, let's go to America. And we went on this way, and we find 3 soldiers was coming on the bicycle.
So my mom was also trying to make her way back to Hungary, but things were very, very confusing, as you can imagine. The trains were not working anymore, so you couldn't take a train. There were Russians, there were German soldiers, there were American soldiers, British soldiers. Everybody's trying to get home because the war is over now. So my mom had to make her way through Germany, through Austria, and back to Hungary, to Szolnok, where she once lived. She didn't know who survived and who didn't, and so she made her way back to what was once home. My father also, on crutches and very slowly, had to make his way back through what today is Slovakia, and all the way back to Debrecen, where his family was from. He also didn't know who survived. When my mom got back to Szolnok, she decided to look for family members. So she went to all the different little towns in the area where they used to live. But before she left, she decided to take a chance, and she sent a telegram to Debrecen to my father to say, "I'm back, come and get me." And then she went to the different towns. But every time she would go to a different town to look for family members, she would leave a note before leaving, saying, "If Les comes, tell him I went to that town." And in the next town, she would leave a note saying, "If Les comes, tell him I went to that town." And so every place she went, she left a little note for him just in case he came. She didn't know whether he was alive or not even. So when my father got back, his mom and his older sister with her 5-year-old son arrived back also, which was really a miracle because usually the elderly and the very young did not survive. But my father got her telegram. And so the next day he went to Szolnok to look for her. But what he found was a note that said, "I went to this town." And then he went to that town, and he went to another town where he followed all her notes until he finally caught up with her. And they were married the next day. And you saw their picture in the beginning on their wedding day. So they started to put their lives back together again. And 1949, a few years later, the Hungarian government decided that they were going to be a communist country, part of the Soviet Union. So my father said, "You know what, I'm done here." So they had to escape from Hungary. They literally had to escape. They left from Hungary to Austria, from Austria to Italy, and from Italy to Israel. Israel was a brand new country. It just became a state in 1948. So guess what was going on? There was a war going on. So the first thing in Israel, my father had to join the military. But this time he was fighting for the reestablishment of the Jewish homeland. And so I was born in Israel. And in 1964, the family moved to the United States. And in 1986, my parents joined me here in Texas. And here's the family that has grown since, and I really have to even update this picture because it has grown again since I put this together. So that concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you so much, Julie, as always, for. Can you still hear me? Okay, good. I think I froze for a second. Thank you so much, as always, for sharing your parents' story. We do have some questions, and if you still have a question, please go ahead and use the Q&A button to ask it. Our first one is from Amanda, who said she actually heard you speak at our educator conference a couple of years ago. So she enjoyed hearing your story again, and asks, what is the most important thing you think your parents would say to a group of 6th grade students just learning about the Holocaust for the first time? I'm guessing Amanda might be a teacher.
I think my parents would probably say, pay attention. And if you see something, make sure you tell either your parents or someone. If you see somebody being bullied, or if you see something happening, don't just stand there because it's not you. They would probably say something, do something about it.
Oh, she says, confirms, yes, she is a teacher. I hope that helps, Amanda. Another question for you, Julie. How open were your parents about their experiences as you were growing up, or how long did it take them to start telling their stories?
Well, they weren't very open. I actually didn't know anything about their stories until they did this interview that you just finished watching. My parents didn't say a thing while I was growing up. And when Steven Spielberg went around and started interviewing survivors after Schindler's List, that's when I insisted that they talked. And that was really the first time I heard it, was when I actually got a copy of this interview. And I was already 40 years old. So, you know, I grew up not knowing. I knew something happened from little comments here and there. I knew they were in the Holocaust, but I really didn't know their story until this video.
And what inspired you to continue to tell their story? What was it like putting this presentation together?
You know, it was difficult. You know, when I first heard their testimonies, they both have a 2-hour, this is just a small portion of their interview. It's a 2-hour interview for both. And so when I heard their stories, it actually changed my life completely, because I said, you know, this has to be told. It's not so much about their story, it's all the stories, that we just have to tell the story so that this could never happen again. And so it became my mission to teach as much as I can about the Holocaust and prevent anything this horrible from happening again.
We appreciate that at the museum as well. These personal stories are so impactful for adults and students alike. Another question is a little bit different. What about some of these family photos and artifacts you had in your presentation from when your parents were young? How did you manage to get your hands on those? Because I know a lot of materials were destroyed or missing.
Yeah, I was actually lucky to have, I don't have a lot of pictures. And actually what I have is that over there at the museum, I donated all of our precious photos because I know they'll be safe there. But the photos I do have are from family members. So my mom had an aunt who survived, and she stayed in Hungary, and she had some family photos. Not very many. I really don't have a lot of pictures. The only people who survived from my mom's side of the family, immediate family, was her 2 sisters and this one aunt, and that was it. So that's all I have. On my father's side, I even have less pictures than that.
We have a difficult question from someone, but see what you think. So another teacher who said he's giving, or I'm sorry, maybe she is giving her a presentation to the Holocaust to their 8th grade class due to some of the students saying they don't believe the Holocaust happened. Any ideas on ways to approach that? How do you start talking to people? I'm not sure if you had experiences like that with people who don't believe it happened.
I really have not had an experience like that, but I've been prepared because I knew someday it will come. And, you know, the only thing I can tell you is that if you don't believe that the Holocaust happened, then you're actually calling all the Nazis liars as well, not just the Jews, because the Nazis have told their stories and told of the horrors that they were a part of. And there's just too much evidence in Poland and in Germany to say it never happened.
And I'm also going to put in the chat, if you need some extra help with the presentation, we have a great section on our website for educators, resources for students. We do programming for students as well, field trips, of course. So always feel free to reach out to the museum and our education team if you need some extra support in that area too. Well, Julie, I think we were able to get to all of our questions today. Again, we really appreciate you sharing your parents' story. It's so important to keep this history alive and shared with the public. So thank you again to everyone watching today. We do have a few more sessions of this series running through August 10th every Tuesday. We hope you'll join us for other stories as well. Otherwise, everyone have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.